Everyone feels sorry for Carmela Soprano, and the show wants you to. It works hard at it. You see her sitting in church asking for forgiveness for a life she didn't fully choose. You see her crying alone. You see her trying to be a good mother while her husband is out doing things she can't acknowledge out loud. You see a woman trapped, except she wasn't trapped, and the show knows it. And if you go back and actually watch it, Carmela Soprano is one of the most morally complicated characters in the entire series. Not because she's a villain, because she made a choice over and over for 20 years, and the show is completely honest about that even when Carmela isn't. That's what this video is about. Now here's the thing nobody wants to say about Carmela, is that she knew. Not in the vague, plausible deniability way the show sometimes gets credit for portraying. She knew specifically. She knew what Tony did for a living. She knew what it meant when Tony left in the middle of the night and came back with blood on his shirt. There's a scene early in the series where a therapist sits across from her and says it plainly. She tells Carmela that Tony is a criminal, that the food in her refrigerator, the house she lives in, the fur coats, all of it is paid for with blood. And she tells her that the only ethical thing to do is leave, take the children, and go. Carmela never goes back to that therapist, and she stays married to Tony for 6 seasons. That's not a woman who didn't know. That's a woman who knew and made her calculation and decided the life was worth what it costs. Carmela Soprano grew up Catholic in the same New Jersey world Tony grew up in. She knew what she was marrying into. She met Tony as a teenager. She watched him become what he became while she was standing right next to him. She's smart. That's the part that gets lost when people talk about her. She runs the household with a precision Tony couldn't replicate. She handles the social obligations of being a mob wife with a competence that never gets acknowledged because it's women's work and the show exists in a world that doesn't credit women's work. But she uses that intelligence almost entirely in service of maintaining the situation rather than changing it. What Carmela has made is a bargain, a specific conscious bargain. She gets the house, the clothes, the private school for the kids, the vacations, the respect that comes with being Tony Soprano's wife in that particular world, the safety of financial security that she grew up without and has no intention of giving back. In exchange, she accepts the lies, she accepts the infidelity, and Tony cheats on her constantly, serially, without particular effort to hide it, because he knows she won't leave. She accepts the violence that pays for everything. And here's the key thing. The bargain isn't just with Tony, it's with herself. She tells herself she's a good Catholic woman. She goes to church, she does charity work, and she raises her children with values. But the therapist she saw once said it directly. The reason Carmela doesn't come back isn't that she can't hear the truth. It's that she heard it clearly and decided the price of acting on it was too high. The cheating is where the bargain gets more visible. Tony cheats throughout the entire series. Some of them become genuine entanglements, dangerous in their own ways. Most of them are just transactions. Carmela knows. She doesn't always know the specific woman, but she knows the pattern. She's been living with it for years, and what she does with that knowledge is interesting. She doesn't leave, and she doesn't confront it directly most of the time. What she does is use it. She uses Tony's guilt as leverage. When Tony is guilty, he's more generous and more present, more willing to give her what she wants, whether that's money or attention or even a conversation about their life that he'd otherwise avoid entirely. She's not passive in this dynamic, she's working it. The separation in season 4 is the clearest version of this. Carmela kicks Tony out, and it feels for a few episodes like the moment the show has been building toward. She's done, and she's finally choosing herself. And then she takes him back. Not because she was manipulated into it, not because Tony wore her down. She makes a decision and she goes back to get it. She knows exactly what she's doing. There's another scene that people remember but don't always sit with. Father Phil, the young priest who comes to the house regularly, who watches movies with Carmela, shares food with her, has these long, intimate conversations with her about faith and meaning in her life. Carmela develops feelings for him, or something that functions like feelings. She cooks for Father Phil. She stays up late with him. She is, in the language the show uses very carefully, emotionally unfaithful to Tony in a way she'd never admit to herself because it doesn't technically cross a physical line. Father Phil is using her too. He shows up at houses where women will feed him and give him their emotional energy and treat him like a confessor. Tony clocks it immediately, and he's not wrong. But the interesting thing isn't Father Phil, it's Carmela. She needs this. She needs somewhere to put the parts of herself that the bargain with Tony doesn't accommodate. The longing for something more meaningful, more honest, and more spiritually coherent than the life she's actually living. Father Phil absorbs all of that for her, and it lets her keep not changing anything. At a certain point, Carmela goes to see Dr. Malfi, not as a patient, but to essentially interrogate the woman she suspects Tony might have feelings for. What's remarkable about that scene is how completely Carmela holds herself together. She walks into a therapist's office, assesses the situation with total precision, and walks out Meadow having said almost exactly what she intended to say and nothing she didn't. This is not a woman who doesn't know what she's doing. Melfi describes the meeting to her own therapist afterward. She is shaken by it, not because Carmela was overtly threatening, because she wasn't, but because of the control underneath the performance of normality. Carmela is performing a character, the devoted mother and the long-suffering wife. She performs it to Tony, to the outside world, to everybody. But there are moments where the performance slips just enough to show you who's actually running the thing. Now, the argument Carmela makes to herself is the children. She stays for AJ and Meadow. She doesn't want to blow up their lives. She doesn't want them to lose the financial security. And there's truth in that. She loves her children genuinely. But the show complicates this too, because Meadow grows up and figures out who her father is.
Are you in the mafia?
I'm in the waste management business. Everybody immediately assumes you're mobbed up.
The innocence Carmela was supposedly protecting gets lost anyway, just more slowly. And what Meadow inherits from watching her parents' marriage isn't protection, it's a template, a specific lesson about what love looks like when one person holds all the power and the other person makes accommodations to stay close to it. AJ inherits something too, the anxiety and the depression. Tony looks at AJ and sees his own worst qualities reflected back. And some of what produced those qualities is the household he grew up in, the tension that everyone pretended wasn't there, and the things everyone agreed not to look at directly. In later seasons, Carmela gets involved in a real estate project. She wants something that's hers, an accomplishment, and basically an income. It soon goes badly, and what that storyline reveals is something Carmela hasn't fully reckoned with. Everything she has access to, the money and the contractors who show up when Tony's name is behind the project, the thing that's supposed to be hers is made possible entirely by the thing she's supposedly independent from. She can see this on some level. The show makes sure of that, but seeing it and doing something about it are two different things. Now here's what makes Carmela one of the most interesting characters in the show. The show never lets her be simply a victim. It would have been easier to write her that way, more comfortable to watch. A lot of shows would have made Carmela tragic in a clean, uncomplicated way. The woman who didn't know and who was trapped, who had no real choice. The Sopranos makes her tragic in a harder way. The woman who knew, who had more agency than she ever admitted, and who made her choices with open eyes, and then spent 20 years constructing an internal narrative that didn't fully account for those choices. That's not a condemnation of Carmela. It's something closer to an honest portrait of how people actually work, how capable we are of seeing our situation clearly and still finding reasons not to change it. Carmela is not evil. She's not even particularly unusual. She's a smart woman who made a calculation earlier in her life and then spent the rest of it managing the consequences of that calculation while telling herself a slightly different story about what happened. Tony does the same thing. The whole show is full of people doing the same thing, but Carmela does it with a specific kind of discipline that the show tracks with extraordinary care across 6 seasons. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this.